Those are some of the protesters that are lining a few of the streets here in London. They do expect that there will be more of them out tomorrow, sending a message of disdain for President Trump. Earlier today, I sat down for an exclusive interview with Piers, the editor-at-large at DailyMail.com, who explained what could be driving some of that anger and why their message, he believes, does not tell the whole story here. Watch.
Donald Trump, as you know, is a very divisive, polarizing character, not just in America, but around the world. And in Britain, we only tend to see the sound bites of his worst stuff. So you hear, just little bits and pieces, and it's all normally negative. So a lot of people in Britain have a very negative view of the president. Having said that, it's quite geographic, a bit like America, where when I'm in America and I'm going to New York or LA, they're all anti-Trump. When you go down to Texas and Florida and Alabama and places, they're very pro-Trump. Similarly here, in a way that the Brexit debate has split the country, I think the further north you go, the more pro-Trump people you would find. So I think in London he'll get a hot time, but I'm not sure he's spending much time in London, so he's probably going to avoid it. So there might be
for a hot minute.
They'll be doing what most Liberals have been doing for the last 2 years. They'll be screaming into a load of hot air, but he's actually not there.
But in many ways, as you say, he does seem to represent the Brexit movement. It's like our anti-establishment drain the swamp idea is represented here in this idea of saying to the EU, forget it. We're tired of sending money over there. We're tired of having open borders. What's your feel for how that's going, and how does he reflect that?
I think that Donald Trump makes a lot of very good points. He just makes them in a very abrasive and confronting way. But then he's a New York real estate tycoon. I mean, he's been doing this for 50 years with buildings. His modus operandi is to go crashing into something, blow it all up, and see how the cards end up and what kind of deal you can get. He looks at everything. And I always remind people in Britain, look, he's not an ideologue, really, Donald Trump. He has a few things that he feels strongly about: security, immigration, jobs, and so on. But actually, he's a pragmatic business guy. He looks at everything as a deal. And I look at the bust-up he's had with NATO, for example, and I find myself nodding. He's absolutely right. America pays way more than anybody else, and we expect America to come to our aid if there's any trouble, whilst most countries in the EU pay substantially less than they should be paying. So he's absolutely right. But in normal Trump way, he goes crashing in like a bull in a china shop and upsets them all. I don't mind that. I actually find that style is quite refreshing. Most people in Britain, I have to say, probably don't like it because they're not used to it. But we could do with Donald Trump handling our Brexit negotiations. We might get some stuff done.
Well, I mean, he's going to talk to Theresa May about it. It'll be very interesting to see if he has any influence on her when it comes to that, because there's no doubt in private conversations, based on what we know about how he feels about Brexit, that he's going to say, you need to stiffen your sinews here, and you need to stick with this and not have a soft Brexit. The only way to do this is in 100%. Do you think he'll have any effect on that conversation here?
I think the big problem is Theresa May is about as far removed from Donald Trump as a world leader could possibly be. She is somebody who voted Remain. She voted to stay in the European Union. Then she gets handed the ultimate hospital pass for any new prime minister, which is the biggest issue on her watch. Is something she fundamentally doesn't agree with. She's having to deliver something she doesn't want. And as anything in life, if you're trying to do that, it's very hard. Do you honour the democratic result, which I think we should, or do you fudge it so much that effectively it becomes kind of staying in the European Union without actually really leaving? And I think if that happens, there will be uproar from people in this country. 17.5 million Brits voted to leave the European Union, and they've been branded a bit like Trump supporters: stupid, didn't know what they were doing, blah, blah, blah. I've never believed that. I believed absolutely they knew what they were doing. They were fed up with the bureaucratic nature of the European Union. They thought it was working against the interests of the country. I didn't completely agree that we should have left. I would have preferred to stay in and fight for a better deal. But I absolutely accept we lost that battle. Right now, it seems to me that the establishment in this country is trying to pretend the referendum never happened.
So where do you see this whole thing going? Does Theresa May hang on to her job? Does Boris Johnson become the next prime minister?
Theresa May is what we call the Teflon kid. Nothing sticks to her. And she seems to be able to survive simply because at the moment the Conservative Party in this country are absolutely terrified that if they were to try and unseat her, and under normal circumstances they would, and they want her gone, But if they try to do that, it may trigger not just a leadership contest, which becomes very bitter and fractures the party between the Brexiteers and those who don't want to leave, but more fundamentally, it might trigger a general election. And it may let in, through all this fracturing, Jeremy Corbyn, who is about as far left a politician as this country has ever had leading a party in its entire existence. So we could end up with a very hardline socialist government within a few months if we're not very careful. Most people don't actually want that to happen, but this could happen through the Conservative Party tearing itself in two.
Tell me what you see in the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. I mean, obviously, two very strong characters. The president has wanted for a long time to sit down eyeball to eyeball with him, and he seems to feel like he can get through to him on some measures. I
interviewed Bill Clinton about Putin once, and they didn't cross over for very long, but in the period that they did, they had a few meetings. And I said, what was he like to deal with? It was actually very instructional, I think, for Donald Trump. I'm sure it'll be a similar technique. They went in a room together, and there were 50 people on each side, everyone posturing and trying to score points. And then one of them would throw everybody out. And he said, I'd be left there with Vladimir Putin. And he was a hard guy, he said, very tough negotiator. And we'd go at each other verbally, bang, bang, bang. But at the end of it, we'd agree points of agreement. And I said to him, well, OK, but how many times did he keep his word? And Bill Clinton said, well, ask me a different way. Ask me how many times he didn't keep his word when we shook hands. I went, OK. So I asked him. He said he always kept his word to me when we shook hands. I think Trump and Putin will have a similar kind of view of each other. They both think they're pretty tough guy leaders. They're quite macho. I think they'll sit in a room probably full of people. They may well get rid of everyone and just have one-on-one. And I think they'll do the same fist smashing, and at the end of it, they'll agree stuff. That's the kind of trading that Donald Trump's done for 50 years. I think Putin will remind him of the tough guy business people he's had to do business and deals with all his life. So, you know, I agree with Trump's basic premise, which is notwithstanding all the noise around Russian collusion and so on, it actually is in the world's interest that the United States of America has a good relationship with Russia. And if that means that Putin and Trump can facilitate that, and these two hard guys can reach at least some points of consensus, and they're not at war with each other, that is a good thing.
So lastly, the meeting with the Queen.
Yeah.
What do you anticipate will happen between Queen Elizabeth, who has seen every president since Truman, and I don't know, 12, 13 prime ministers that she has been a steady hand throughout. What do you think she'll think of Donald Trump?
The Queen has seen them all. She's seen them all come. She's seen them all go. She's seen them all off. We've had the same monarch my entire lifetime and some. And she's now in her mid-90s. She's the most wise person you'd ever... I've met her a few times. Incredibly wise, very intelligent, but ultimately she's incredibly calm. Nothing's going to faze her. Donald Trump could somersault into her room at Windsor Castle, blowing a bugle, and she would say, Mr. President, how lovely to see you, and wouldn't bat an eyelid. So I think it'll go, as it always does with the Queen, very smoothly. She has had the worst dictators in the world standing there. She's had some of the nicest people in the world. But what she is somebody who's a pragmatist and a realist, and she will afford him the respect of the office of the presidency of the United States. And for Trump, I know this because I've talked to him about it a lot, it's an incredibly emotional moment for him, I think, even for somebody quite non-emotional like Trump, because his mother was born and raised in Scotland until she was 18 and was, he said, an arch-monarchist. She loved the royal family. She loved the Queen. Every time the Queen came on television, he told me, she would insist the family gather around and watch the Queen. And I think for Donald Trump, actually, putting aside everything else, whether you love him or loathe him, that moment when he walks in and meets one of his mother's heroes, true heroes, will be a really special moment for him. And I suspect he and the Queen will get on very well.